One Piece has those moments that just stop time. Not Ace dying, not Luffy versus Kaido, not Roger on the scaffold. I'm talking about chapter 1179, dropped in early April 2026 when Eiichiro Oda pulled back the curtain on a character who'd been hidden for almost a decade and showed us Imu's face for the very first time. And the internet just lost it. Because what showed up was nothing like anyone expected. Lunarian, tan skin, long white hair covering half his face, massive S-curved horns just like Kaido's, wings, a demon tail, circular tattoos all over his body, including an eye tattooed on his right hand. Black clouds with eyes, that Hagoromo thing we know from awakened Zoans like Lucci and the Five Elders, but different from anything we'd seen before. And a naginata with a zigzag tip leaking those same dark clouds. And as if that wasn't enough, a week later in chapter 1180, this guy shows up in Elbaf, blocks Sanji's kick with his own kick, blocks Zoro's King of Hell style with his tail, and sends both of them flying with a move called Omen, a small black flame that explodes with enough force to leave even the giants of Elbaf completely frozen. Gabon, who was at God Valley, said he'd never felt hockey like that in his entire life. So the question everyone's been asking, with very real urgency, is this: who can actually beat Imu? My name is Shoyo, and today we're gonna try to answer that for real. Not vaguely, not with Luffy's gonna win because he's the main character. We're gonna look at what Imu has shown, what the manga has revealed about him, and map out who actually has a real shot at this fight. So go ahead and drop a like, subscribe, and let's get into it. Before any names, you need to understand exactly what we're dealing with here, because Imu isn't just some powerful villain. He's a completely different category of threat in this story. And chapter 1179 proved that with a clarity that leaves zero room for doubt. First, the longevity. Imu is confirmed as one of the original 20 founders of the world government. That puts him as someone who existed before the Void Century, before any power structure we know in One Piece. That's over 800 years of active existence, not sleeping in a vault, not waiting around, governing, deciding who lives and who dies on a global scale for 8 centuries. And chapter 1179 shows him coughing up blood when he leaves Mary Jiwa's for the first time, which suggests that leaving the Holy Land takes a serious physical toll on him. And that's the first real, concrete vulnerability the story has given us. Second, the power he's shown. Imu wiped out the kingdom of Luluzia with a single attack before even showing his face. An entire island erased from the map, and he did it like it was nothing. Then in Elbaf, the magic circle that appeared when he showed up was big enough to swallow the main city and the entire castle. The Conqueror's hockey wave that came off of it knocked out literally everyone around. And then in chapter 1180, he neutralized Zoro and Sanji in a matter of seconds without even looking like he was trying. No big flashy attack, just Omen, a small black flame, and it was over. Third, the Devil Fruit. The official introduction box just says Devil Fruit with no name, no classification. That's intentional on Oda's part. In One Piece, when he avoids naming a power at this stage of the story, he's saving something bigger for later. What we can tell from the Hagoromo clouds around his body is that it's most likely an awakened mythical Zoan. And considering that the introduction calls Imu the creator of the world government, and there's speculation he might be connected to the very origin of devil fruits themselves, the power we're dealing with here is something the story hasn't fully measured yet. With that said, let's get into the actual names. The first one is the most obvious, and there's no way to start with anyone other than Luffy. Not because he's the main character, but because chapter 1180 ends with him and Loki getting ready to face Imu head on. This fight isn't a theory anymore, it's happening. Luffy's Gear 5, the Nika, is described by the Gorosei themselves as the most feared fruit in history. And the detail that the Elbaf arc is carefully building is exactly the contrast between Luffy's drums of liberation in Gear 5 and the drums of oppression that Imu triggered when he arrived in Elbaf, which made the houses dance, with evil faces. Oda didn't do that by accident. He's drawing two opposing concepts with two opposing characters. And the conclusion of that contrast is the final showdown. But there's a real problem that chapter 1180 put on the table. Zoro and Sanji, two of the strongest characters in One Piece, got taken out in seconds without Imu even seeming to try. That means Luffy needs something beyond Gear 5 as it currently exists to win this fight. It's not a narrative defeat, it's a warning. Oda is saying there's still room to grow, and that Imu is the ceiling of that growth. The blood he coughed up leaving Mary Jiwa's might be the thread. If Imu has a physical cost for being away from the Holy Land, if the fight lasts long enough, if Luffy finds a way to sustain Gear 5 past its current limit, the narrative arc closes. Nika as freedom against Imu as oppression. That's the ultimate fantasy of One Piece, and it's being built right now. But Luffy isn't the only name in this conversation. The second one is someone we've never actually seen fight. Not once in 30 years of publication, Monkey D. Dragon, the man that the Marines classify not as the strongest, but as the most dangerous person in the world. That distinction matters, because dangerous in One Piece isn't just about raw power. It's about what a person represents to the entire system. Dragon built the only organization capable of challenging the world government on multiple fronts simultaneously. And in all that time, Oda has never shown him fight. That's a massive narrative choice. When that moment comes, it's going to be a reveal on the same scale as what we saw with the Gorosei in Egghead. And Dragon's argument against Imu isn't about raw power. It's about ideological opposition built over decades. He knows something about Imu that no other character knows. And if the theory about his connection to the Lunarians or to God Valley checks out, the fight between them is personal in a way that goes way beyond politics. After Dragon, there's a third name that can't be left off this list. Shanks stopped an admiral with a single glance of Conqueror's haki. Not the admiral himself, everyone around him. As side pressure from a distance, without even meaning to hurt anyone. That alone puts his haki in a category that very few characters in the story can claim. The problem with Shanks as the one who defeats Imu is narrative. If he has the power and the information to act, why hasn't he acted? The most likely answer is that he doesn't want to destroy the system. He wants to control the transition. And that's the plan of someone who's going to shape what comes after Imu falls, not the one who brings him down. And speaking of things nobody saw coming, there's actually the most important part of everything. Chapter 1179 brought, that needs to be said before we move on. Imu coughed up blood, leaving Mary Joie, and he showed up in Elbaf, visibly going through a physical transformation that isn't stable. That implies there's some kind of pact, some limitation, some condition that ties Imu to the Holy Land in a way that, when broken, takes a toll on his body. Because up until chapter 1178, we only knew Imu as an unbeatable shadow that wiped out islands without showing up. Starting from 1179, we see a being that bleeds, that has a cost. That moved to Elbaf with an urgency that the five elders themselves tried to stop. That means something in Elbaf is enough of a threat that Imu personally had to be there. And the only obvious candidate for that role is Luffy with Nika. And then, last but not least, there's one name I had to put on this list. Not because it makes sense, but because this is One Piece. And leaving this name out would honestly be intellectually dishonest on my part. Buggy the Clown. Okay, I know. But hear me out. Buggy started this story as the joke of chapter 1. A guy who ate a devil fruit that was supposed to be completely useless. Who got kicked around by Shanks when they were cabin boys on Roger's ship. Who lost to Luffy back in East Blue when Luffy literally knew nothing. That same guy is now a Yonko. He leads the biggest mercenary organization in the world. He has admirals, former warlords, and ex-Yonko level captains working for him by accident, by misunderstanding, by pure absurd storytelling from Oda that works in a way that no other manga writer could pull off. And here's the argument nobody wants to admit exists. Imu can't wipe Buggy off the map the same way he wiped out Lulusia. Not because Buggy is too strong, but because he's unkillable in a completely idiotic way. The Chop Chop fruit splits his body into pieces, and every single piece stays alive and fully functional. There's no way to kill someone like that with a conventional attack. You literally cannot cut Buggy in half because he'll laugh in your face while the pieces fly off in different directions and then just put themselves back together. And Imu, based on what was shown in chapters 1179 and 1180, uses Omen, Naginata slashes, Conqueror's haki. All of that against Buggy would have the same result as always. Nothing. The guy just doesn't die. Obviously, Buggy is not going to defeat Imu. That's not happening. The point is, if by some cosmic narrative accident Buggy ran into Imu, the most powerful being who's existed in 800 years would be standing there staring at this clown with absolutely no idea what to do while Buggy screamed about getting revenge on everyone. And you know what's the funniest part? Given everything that's already happened to Buggy in this story, that wouldn't even be the most ridiculous thing that's ever happened to him. Oda made this man a Yonko. Nothing is off the table. At the end of the day, when you look at just what the manga is building right now, the most honest answer is this. Imu was built to be the final obstacle. Not just for Luffy, but for the entire idea that the world can change. He's existed for 8 centuries specifically to make sure nothing changes, that no story gets told, that no Nika ever shows up. And One Piece, in 30 years of publication, has always been about one single thing. Who gets to tell the story of the world? Zoro took Omen and got sent packing. Sanji got kicked back and got sent packing. And Luffy is eating to recover his energy and heading in next. The answer to who can defeat Imu is being written right now, every Sunday. And for the first time in decades, the final fight isn't a theory anymore. It's happening. Now, tell me in the comments, do you think Luffy can beat Imu on his own? Or is Loki gonna be the key in this fight? And somewhere in all of this, in some parallel universe, does Buggy accidentally solve the whole thing? If you enjoyed the video, you already know what to do. Drop a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.